There, I've officially managed to record every single lecture this term. Feeling good. Yeah. That's like the most important thing, I feel like. And then everything else can just kind of go however. But I do have a class tomorrow, so I better not forget tomorrow, but feeling pretty good about it. Okay, we were just saying, put on your best sad face. It's our last class today. We do have a little bit of material to cover, but I think it's the most fun section of the whole course. And so just kind of sit back, relax, enjoy. But before we go into that material, I do want to talk a little bit about assignments, quizzes, the final exam, and then we'll start talking about amortization schedules. So what I've done, and this kind of could be bad news for anyone who's like me, assignment 11, and I wrote it down here, assignments 11 and 12 assignments 11 and 12, quizzes, I'm scrolling like it's on my iPad. No, it's not. Quizzes 8, 9, oops, 10, and the bonus quiz. So I posted a bonus quiz, and really all I'm doing is I'm going to drop your lowest quiz mark. If you decide not to do the bonus quiz, then of course that's the one that's going to get dropped. So no harm, no foul. But if you wanted to boost your grade, right, you'd have to get a higher grade on the bonus quiz than one of your lower quiz grades. But at least you have the opportunity to work through some of those with the bonus quiz. Now, the thing with the bonus quiz, and the reason I made it a bonus quiz, is because we didn't explicitly cover that material in class. It's in your textbook in section 7.5, but and you have all the tools. It's just going to require a little bit of extra thinking. There's a practice for the bonus. There's a practice for quiz 8, 9, and the bonus, not for quiz 10 because it's basically like assignment 12. Okay. And there's notes on that on Moodle. Okay. But so the bonus is there to just boost your quiz grade. Potentially, and make sure you check out the practice for the bonus. It's not for marks, but just to see what it's all about and see if you want to try it. Okay. So here, I'll just make a note. I will drop your lowest quiz grade. So if that happens to be the bonus because you didn't do it, then that's fine. Don't worry about it. Okay, and let's see what else is due. Okay, so these, you have to be really careful. These are all due April 23rd at midnight. Okay, that's the Friday, and then we have our final exam on the Monday. So just be aware that I'm giving you this extra time. Okay, these are all due Friday, April 23rd at 11:59 p.m. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like a double-edged sword here. Thanks for the extra time, but also, man, this feels like a busy April 22nd to me. So just maybe as you work through things, right, maybe just kind of chip away at these assignments and at the quizzes, and then you won't be so overwhelmed. Okay? So that's just a warning. Okay? And I'll show you what's going on here on our Moodle page. Okay, so you'll see that there's a practice. So practice for quiz 8, not for marks. Quiz 8 is a 3-phase problem. So one of those ones that we went through last day, if you use your calculator, they're not that bad, right? But you have to break up your timeline essentially into 3 phases. And then there's a practice for quiz 9. And then there's quiz 9, which is on perpetuities, which is section 7.3. Okay, we did those last day. And then the bonus quiz, there's a practice. And then see here, so quiz 10, below it, it says see assignment 12 for practice, right? And so assignment 12 is a good indicator. You have 20 minutes to do all of these. And that should be pretty good. Okay, so today, notice that there's an in-class mortgage, which is section 8.1 worksheet. And so you should have something that looks like this, right? Either kind of available, or this is what we're gonna work through. We're definitely gonna spend a lot of time on the first one, and then we'll see where we get to in terms of time. And then we might do the second one, but I'll post all the solutions to these. You'll see here, it's hidden here, in-class mortgage worksheet solutions. So after class, I'll unhide it, reveal it. Okay. But what I wanted to do, yeah, so for the final exam, we have to do section 8.1, so we're not going to be able to do a full-on review, but I do want to give you an idea of the final exam. So, final exam, what's it going to be? Okay. Here's the thing, there won't be a practice final because we'll have seen everything elsewhere. Okay, so what I'm going to do instead of a practice final, mostly because the problem with a practice final at this point is the questions that you'll have are all going to be worded differently. They're going to test the same concept, but everyone's going to be taking from a bank of questions. And so that's why I don't want to give you a practice exam just like we've been doing before, right, where I kind of lead you down that path, and now it's time for me to let you go. You can spread your wings and fly. So that's what the final exam is all about. Don't worry, you will be prepared, but just I don't want to set you up for failure by doing a practice final exam like I've been doing, right, where I really lead you down the right path, but I will direct you to specific problems to practice. Okay, so good. Okay, the layout for the final exam. Yeah, spread your wings and fly, or I guess if you want, I'm pushing you out of the nest regardless. Ah, have you guys seen those little birds when they get pushed out of the nest? Ah, that's how you'll feel. No, it'll be fine. You'll be an elegant swan. So, do swans fly? Surely. Yeah. Tough love at this point. So anyways, you will be able to handle it. Do not worry. The final exam is going to be 9 parts. Okay. Unlike the tests, you can do them in any order. Okay. So the final exam is 9 parts, and you can do them in any order. You can do them in any order. Okay. I'll say what section each part is from. Okay, so I will say, or you will know, which section each part is from. For example, it'll say kind of part 2, maybe it'll say merchandising, which means what? In terms of our formula sheet, right? Where's our formula sheet? Merchandising is way up here at the top, right? So it'll be using this section of the formula sheet, right? You don't want to look anywhere else, right? So there's going to be a merchandising section, a CVP analysis section. Okay, so let's see here. There's going to be a simple interest section. Whoop. There's going to be a compound interest section. Okay. There will be 2 annuities sections, probably because we have regular annuities and annuities due. So that's 2 annuity sections. Okay. There's going to be 1 mortgage section, which we're going to do today. So that's where are we at here? That's 8 sections. I can't tell if my thumb is part of it or not. I think that's 7 sections. And then, oh yeah, there's a supply and demand section. I'm gonna list these. And a chapter 1 section, which is really just meant to have just kind of short, quick problems, okay? So the parts are these. Chapter 1, just kind of short answer problems. And then supply and demand. Now here, it wouldn't be a real test if I wasn't going off and being a little bit bad, right? So what I've decided to do, because the supply and demand section are supposed to have like, oh, so if you are brewing beer and the price of wheat increases, what happens to your supply curve or your demand curve? I don't know. We didn't spend any time doing those. So I'm going to replace that with solving for the equilibrium price and quantity, right? So if I give you a supply and demand curve, then you can solve for the equilibrium price and quantity, P and Q, which you've had to do on a quiz and you had to do on test 1, right? So we've seen that before, and I'll point you in the right direction on Moodle. I'll do the full list again. So there's going to be a supply and demand, and then we move on to merchandising. And then we do a CVP analysis, right? So from here on out, we're basically just working our way through the formula sheet block by block, right? And so then there's a simple interest section. Then we have a compound interest section. When I say compound interest, I mean no regular payments, right? It's just where we started when we introduced compound interest, so that compound interest section. And then we're gonna have an annuities section, part 1, and then annuities. So a second annuities question or a second annuities section, okay? These, you'll be pleased to know, are exactly like test 3, right? So these are gonna have the same format as test 3. So you enter your calculator values if you prefer that, right? Which we probably do. And then it's gonna ask you to solve for something, the payment amount, the future value, or the present value. Okay. And then a mortgage section, mortgage / amortization schedule. They're the same. Okay. So I don't have it perfectly worked out yet because I've got other finals coming up before ours. Hey, I'm no different from you guys. I have to prioritize. Kind of this weekend, early next week, I'll update the Moodle page, and then you'll have a really good idea, and I'll point you in the right directions of what to look at to practice for each section. Okay, so I'll do that. Each part, so you can do all these, so you have to do all these parts, of course. You can do them in any order, but once you go into a quiz, right, you have 15 minutes to do it. Okay, so 15 minutes, that's shorter than our quizzes, which are 20 minutes, right? So just be really aware of that when you're practicing, especially. You know how to do these, it's just a matter of keeping up the time limit. And there is an email chain going around where someone else who's teaching this course was like, hey, can we make it 20 minutes? I don't think my students can make it. And I was kind of hoping that the answer would be, yeah, sure, make it 20 minutes. But the answer was no, has to be 15 minutes, and it worked out well last term. So, and there were lots of sections last term, and there was no issue with the time. So just be aware of that, but don't worry about that. Okay, so there hasn't been an issue. It feels like it's not very much time, and you will have the check option, except for, I think, except for the chapter 1. I can't remember. And I'll clarify that on our Moodle page when I get it set up. So unless there's only multiple choice, then there's no check option. But so once you open a part, you will have 15 minutes. And I want to highlight that because that's different. 15 minutes to complete it. And you will have the check option. So you can start with a section that you feel that you can just crush, get it out of the way, okay? And then kind of work through that way. Or maybe you really want to bring yourself down at the beginning of your final. Do the hardest section first. No, I don't know. It's up to you. Choose your own adventure. So you'll have 15 minutes to complete each section, and you will have the check option unless it's a multiple choice section. And I just remember seeing it, and I don't remember for which one it's multiple choice. Okay, but like I said, I will clarify and have it all outlined on Moodle, like I've been doing for at least test 2 and test 3 I did. So, okay. What else? Okay, 15 minutes, you'll have the check option. You have to submit all your work. Okay, so you need to show work for all the sections, and you need to submit it as one PDF in order. Okay, so in terms of work, you need to show work for all questions. Okay, so some of them more than others, right? And I'm not even sure if there's a timeline. I don't remember seeing a timeline. I won't take marks off if there is no timeline, but I'd love to see a timeline. Yeah, so if there's no work required, I'll make a note of that. Okay, so you need to show work for all questions unless I say no work is needed. So I'll do that because, so here, remember for the annuities questions that we had to do for test 3, right? There was really no work. Even when I went through it, I didn't really do any work on paper, so I don't need to see work for that, but I'll make a note of that then, okay? So in general, right, especially for chapter 1 stuff, supply and demand, merchandising, CDP analysis. I just don't see you getting through those parts without doing any work on paper, right? And so you need to show that work and you need to submit it in order. All work must be, oops, it says must. It's not a word, I don't think. Must be submitted as one PDF in order. Okay. So if there is a question where I don't need to see any work, I will make that clear to you. Okay, okay, good. I had a list of things I wanted to talk about here, and I'm looking at it. Oh, last thing. Oh, okay. So you have 3 hours to do the exam, but there's 9 15-minute sections. So 9 times 15, it's really 135 minutes out of 180. So there's 45 minutes that are unaccounted for, okay? In those 45 minutes, you have time to regroup, you have time to scan and upload your work, right? So all your work has to be submitted before 9 o'clock on the Monday. So you will have 3 hours, right, from 6 to 9. To do all 9 parts and submit your work, right? And yeah, if you're using Desmos, then that's okay, that's good, but just say that you're using Desmos. Okay? So that's fine. As long as you tell me where did these numbers come from, oh, they came from Desmos, then that's fine. Okay? Good. So, right, just like the tests, right, use that time that you have between each part just to kind of relax and regroup and kind of refocus on the stuff that you need to do for that next part. Okay? So I'll be available anytime, except I have exams on the 21st, 22nd, and then I have a department meeting on the 23rd. So kind of leading up to the weekend, I'll be kind of busy. But if you do have any questions, let me know and we can meet and we can work through them. So if you have any questions before the exam, let me know and we can meet. Okay, that's totally fine. I'll be available for most of the weekend, tutoring midday on Saturday, but it's okay. I'm sure you guys will be busy with other exams. So just if you have a question, just let me know and we can meet. Okay. Or you can text me. I try to be pretty good about replying as soon as I can. Okay, so I'll keep an eye on the chat, but if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, let's do this last fun section, shall we? Okay. Oh, last thing. There will be an academic integrity quiz that you have to do before you can do the final. I'll open it so you can do it anytime before the final, so it's not going to take up your final exam time. But you do need to do it. You do need to get 100%, which is you basically signing and saying, hey, I'm not gonna work with anyone. I'm not gonna look up answers online. I'm not gonna do any of these things that are bad. That's me paraphrasing, but anyways, I think you all know what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, or hopefully, and you're just signing off and saying, I'll work on my own. All the answers I submit will be my own, and so on. Okay, so there will be an academic integrity quiz you must complete before the final. You must complete and get 100% on. It's like 4 yes or no questions, I'm pretty sure. So not bad before the final exam. So I'll make that available when I get the Moodle set up, and it'll be part of it there. So you have to basically sign off and say, I'm not going to be cheating or working with anyone else, and then you'll be allowed to write the test, and then we'll be all good. Okay. Now for the fun part, the most fun section of the course. We have everything that we need to do it. We just need to look at this information in a different way. So section 8.1 is called mortgages. Typically we talk about mortgages, but really we can call this any sort of amortization schedule, which you're in business, so you've probably heard that term before. And all we're doing is we're building amortization schedules. Amortization schedules. Okay. Usually when we talk about amortization schedules, we're usually talking about mortgages. So that's why it's called mortgages. But really, whenever you borrow money to pay something off, right, that could be equipment, it could be a house, it could be, well, equipment really covers it all. It could be a car, right? It could be anything that you've borrowed money to pay off in a certain amount of time, has an amortization schedule happening in behind the scenes. So when we borrow money, to pay off something, so to pay off an amount, let's say, to pay off an amount in a given period of time, right? An amortization schedule is happening in the background, right? And so an amortization schedule is happening in the background. Okay. I can only assume, so I love words and where do they come from, because it tells us a lot about what's happening, right? So mort is death in French, so I can only assume it's the death of the payments, or the death of how much you owe. And that's just me spitballing, but to me that's how I kill the loan, right? So that's kind of how and it's really how the balance that you owe is decreasing with each payment, right? And so here, right, so the amortization is how the balance owing decreases after each payment. After each payment. Payment is made, let's say. Okay. So what we're going to see is that, okay, you commit to paying, let's say, $400 a month for 5 years to pay off a car, just kind of spitballing here, right? That $400 each month in the beginning is paying off a lot of interest, right? So you have to pay off the interest first, and then you can pay off the principal amount, which is the actual amount that you borrowed, right? But always you have to pay the interest first because the bank only cares about that. And then if you're able to pay off a little bit of the balance, then that's a good thing, right? Because that's how you decrease the balance. You pay interest on the balance, right? So as the balance decreases, right, the amount that you pay towards your interest also decreases, but your payment, the $400 a month, stays the same for all 5 years, right? We're thinking about a car here, just to kind of keep it more reasonable, right? So what happens is as the amount of interest decreases that you have to pay, well, the amount that goes towards the principal increases, right? So they kind of trade places as the balance decreases, right? And so that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at what are these individual interest amounts and principal amounts, and how do they affect the balance, okay? Because making a payment of $400 isn't just going to chip away at the amount that you borrowed, $400. It's going to chip away $400 minus the interest that you've committed to paying, whether that's, you know, sometimes they'll advertise like 1.9% or something like that. So we're just going to look at what's happening in the background. We've looked at things like how long is it going to take to pay off this loan, right? In these scenarios, I'm going to tell you how long it's going to take, right? 25 years for a mortgage, for example, 20 years, right? Or 5 years if you're crazy ambitious, right? And so something like that. And then we can also figure out what the payment amount is, and that's going to come in handy because that's what we're going to need to do. And we could also, what else have we done? How much did we borrow? I'm going to tell you how much we borrowed, right? So we're really going to kind of zero in on a very particular situation where we've purchased something for some amount, okay? Sometimes we make a down payment, right? That down payment takes away from the balance that I'm borrowing, right? It doesn't take away from the balance that I'm paying, right? So if I pay, let's say $600,000 for a house, right? And I make $100,000 down payment, I still pay $600,000 for the house, but I'm borrowing $500,000, right? And so the amortization schedule would only be on that $500,000 only. Okay, so there are a lot of kind of nitpicky things that are going to come up with these amortization schedules. So I'm going to try to kind of highlight them as they come up instead of listing them. So sometimes I'll list them at the top, but then they get kind of lost in the shuffle. So like I said, you should have a handout that looks like this, and it's just 3 examples typed out. Okay. So from the mortgage worksheet, and also, like I mentioned, I'll post the solutions to all of these. So what I want to do is I want to take a lot of time and really focus on working through this first example. Usually that's all I'll have time for. By the time I've gone through and been really careful, and then I'll post the solutions to the rest of these, okay? So make sure you work through these because it is a part on the final, right? And in Moodle, what happens is you'll just have to fill in this sheet, and just like we're about to do, but just with proper values. So, okay. Okay. So let's, okay. I changed my mind. I'm gonna hold off on this and let's just talk about, okay, fine. Let's just talk about this amortization schedule. So this is what it's gonna look like, okay? So this here is an amortization schedule. Amortization schedule. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to block off each of these little sections, and then I'm going to, here, I'm doing it like I said I was going to try not to do, but that's okay. First off, the payment number is going to be 1 through n, right? N is the number of payments. So here, let's call this part 1. The payment number is 1 through n, the number of payments. Okay, so that part is pretty easy. Often what I'll ask for is, tell me what the first 3 payments and the last 3 payments are. So I don't want to see, you know, if you're making monthly payments for 25 years, that's terrible. I don't want to see all of that. I'll ask you for maybe the first 3, usually I ask for the first 2 or 3 payments, and then maybe some middle payments, 2 or 3 here, and then definitely the last few payments, okay? So here I'll make a note that often, often 1, 2, 3, dot, 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 n minus 2, n minus 1, and n, right? Usually that's all I want to see, and you can link them up with a dot, 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 just being like 1, 2, 3, dot, 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 dot. And then let's say there's 300 payments, 300, 299, 298, just count it. Okay. Now, the payment amount is going to be blank for this first row. So here, this is always true like this. And you always start at 0, 1, 2, dot, dot, dot. Okay. So you always start at 0, and then you go 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. The balance is going to be point number 2. The balance for this first part is the initial loan amount. Now it's important that it's just the loan amount because we don't actually care about the full value of the house, for example, or the full value of the car. You often have to put a down payment down, and then that'll decrease the balance that you have to borrow. Right, so this is the initial loan amount. Okay. So that's going to be important. Now, for the payment, okay, this is going to be your PMT, da, 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 da. So it just keeps going. So it's the same payment amount for all of these except this last one. Okay? So I want to talk about this last one, but first I want to develop the rest of these columns because they depend on it. Okay. So let's talk about the interest. Okay. The interest is the interest amount. Okay. So this guy here is going to be the third, or maybe I'll call it the fourth thing, and I'll put a little, I haven't followed the same format, have I? 3, fine. PMT amount. They're all the same, except, and that's really important, the last one. You don't want to do that last one until you're ready. So now, okay, now I'm ready to move on to this interest, which I'll call 4. This is the amount of interest. In fact, it's the amount of the payment paying off interest. Okay, so 4. The interest, the amount of the PMT paying off this interest amount. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to, for the interest for box number 1, I want to denote it with a little subscript 1. For payment number 1, call this I1, only because we're going to refer to it in just a little bit. I'm running out of colors here, aren't I? Time to use blue, I think. The principal is the amount that's paying off the principal. So if you think about, okay, you're making car payments, let's go back to the car payment example, of $400 per month for 5 years, right? So you're making 5 times 12 payments, I don't know. But $400, some amount is paying off the interest. So you've committed to paying, let's say, 1.9% interest. So then you have to find the balance times the interest to find that interest amount. And we're going to talk about that in detail in a bit. But I just want to give you the lay of the land. Then once you've paid off the interest, right, from this payment amount, then the rest will be the principal. It'll go towards the principal, right? So if you owe $100 in interest and you're making payments of $400, then the principal that you're paying off is only $300, right? Because you have to pay $100 towards interest before you can start chipping away at the principal. So 5 is the principal, and it's the amount of the PMT paying off the balance after the interest has been paid. After interest has been paid. So let's call this principal 1 for the first payment must be the payment amount, because it's the same for all of these, minus the interest for that first payment. Okay. So what happens is that the interest plus the principal have to add up to the payment amount. Okay, so what we do is we take the payment amount minus the interest equals the principal. And so you can imagine kind of a little subtraction here, like that. Okay. Now here's where it gets a little bit weird. Okay. Let's see if I have any more colors that I can use. I don't know. Back to orange, I guess, or maybe I'll use this green again because it's the balance, but I'll call this 6. Okay. This balance, if we think about it, okay, so you started off and you owed, I don't know, $30,000. Then you make a payment, some of it goes towards interest. Okay, that's not paying off the balance, but this principal amount is paying off the balance, right? So this amount here is going to be the previous balance. So in this case, this 2 here, minus the principal for that amount. Okay. So 6 is the balance which is kind of the new balance, right? Not to be confused with the runners. The new balance is the previous balance. Okay, so whatever the previous balance was, and that's why we need to have this first line. There are no payments or interest or principal going on, but we need this previous balance in order to figure out the current balance. Okay, so the balance is the remaining amount owing. Okay. So it's going to be the previous balance, oops, minus the principal is the new balance. And maybe I'll just not call it the new balance. So it's the previous balance minus the principal. So for us, that's the same as 2 minus 5 equals 6 in terms of that, the kind of table that we've made, right? So here, if you look at it, right, this balance, that's the previous balance when we're on this line, right? So here, this previous balance minus, you chip away at this principal amount, okay? And then that gives you your new balance. It's important, and it can really throw things off eventually if we don't round to 2 decimal places at each spot, right? Because all of these, this is a payment amount, this is an interest amount, this is a principal amount, and this is a balance amount. So all of these are in dollars, and so at each step we round to 2 decimal places. Okay. So I'll say this, note, since all of these are amounts, oops, are amounts, we round to 2 decimal places at each step, and we have to round properly. We round and I'll put in brackets properly because of course we do. We round properly to 2 decimal places. At each step. So that's going to be important, right? Not in the beginning, it doesn't make a difference. But once we get to the 300th payment, if we haven't been rounding, it can make quite a large difference, right? So at each step, you're going to round to 2 decimal places properly. And then we'll have these dollar amounts. Because remember, if you're working at the bank and now they obviously have machines that generate, or just an Excel sheet that generates these amortization schedules, it's no big deal. But if you had to make one on the fly, I don't know why you would, then you're dealing in money, right? So the customer wants to know about money amounts. And so that's why we have to round properly at each step. Okay, so what happens is, okay, we could go through and we haven't talked about, I've skirted around how to find the interest because I'm going to do it in the example. But once we have kind of the first few lines, we can keep going, right? The balance, we can find the interest owing on the balance, the payment amount is the same. You could, in theory, fill it in for all the payments, right? We're not going to do that. I'm going to ask you, like I said, for maybe, I can't remember where I put it, but maybe the first 3 payments and maybe the last 3 payments or something like that. So in between here, we do a little dot, 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 saying, hey, it keeps going, okay? What happens is we're usually most interested in how this last line goes down. Okay? So what we want to do is the balance, once we make our last payment, right, then we need to make sure that the balance is 0. Okay? So I'll use red for that one. 0. Oh. How did I do that? Okay, I guess we'll do them in order because I've been numbering them in order. Okay, what we're going to do is you're going to find, this is the 7th thing that you're going to do. So let's say you have n payments, then n minus 1th payment, n minus 2th payment. If you want, so just like we did, we're basically repeating this first line, but now down here at the bottom, right? So if you need the last 2 payments, you would need to find the future value of the n minus 2th payment. Okay? So here in 7, to find the payment amount or the payment information for the last 2 lines, we need to find the balance which is the future value of the 3rd to last line. Okay, so what happens, and it's a lot of scrolling already. Okay, so what happens is you have to use your calculator, that's easy enough, right, to find the future value at the n minus 2th payment. So for example, if you're making 300 payments, you would find the future value at 300, 299 at the 298th payment. Okay? Meaning that this is unknown, this is unknown. That's okay. Just like up here, right? Those amounts were unknown, that's okay. We need this balance in order to figure out what the interest is at all these points, okay? So now we do the same thing here. 4 and 5, these go down the same way that they did before, and in fact, 6, because it's just going to be the previous balance minus the amount of the principal. Okay. All right, so this last line is really special because this is where we clear up any debts, right? When we're done this line, we have to have paid off the whole loan. So where we start is we start and say, force this to be 0, okay? So I will use red here because this is the most important thing. So here, 8. After the last payment, the balance must be 0. So we force it to be 0. Okay, so you start down there in that bottom right-hand corner and say, okay, well, that end balance has to be 0. There's no way I can get around that. Okay, then, okay, this principal amount, well, if I'm forcing this amount to be 0, remember this balance is the previous balance minus the principal. So what do I have to do? I have to force this balance to be the same as that previous balance. Okay, and that gets weird, right? And let's see here. I want to do them all in red because it's the most important thing, but I'll do 9 here. So 9, the principal must pay off. So that means the principal must pay off the entire previous balance. So, did we have a number for that? Did I use a? I have 6 on here twice, so I'm hesitant to use 6, but here, right, I should have used a different number, I guess, but then my numbering would be all off if I changed it, so I'm not going to do that. So here, right, this is the previous balance, and so you're going to take that amount and replicate it down here for the principal amount. You also need to pay interest on that amount, right? And so here, 10th thing to keep in mind is that we also need to pay interest on that previous balance. We also have to pay interest on the previous balance. Okay. Where does that leave us? Well, it means that our payment amount, well, if I have to pay interest and I have to pay off the previous balance, my last payment, and this is how it can be slightly different. It can be a little bit more than the PMT amount or a little bit less sometimes, depending on, it should be close, but slightly different. Okay, so this last payment amount has to be the last amount of interest plus the last amount of principal, right? Because you have to pay both of these. And so here, 11, the last payment must pay both the interest and the principal. So the last PMT, or maybe what I'll do is I'll say 11 must be equal to, and what did I have? Must be equal to 10 plus 9. Right? So what happens is we're kind of going off of the fact that, I'll let it catch up here, sorry. Going off of the fact that this balance at the very end has to be 0, right? So that forces this last principal amount to be the same as the previous balance. But I also have to pay interest on that, and so that's this interest amount. And then my last payment has to cover both of these, the interest and the principal, and that's how I arrive at that last payment. Okay? So we need to slow down a little bit for the last line, but otherwise everything is kind of hunky-dory. Okay, so how do we actually do these problems? Now let's have a look at the example that I wanted to show you, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to fill in, it's going to ask us to fill in certain lines here. And so we're going to go ahead and do that work. And then you'll have a really good kind of example to go off of. But looking at the time, I am a little bit worried. So hopefully you guys are okay if we just keep going. And because I do want to make sure that I have enough time to do it, and then if we have a little bit of time left over, we can end early. How about? Or early. Okay, so here's the problem that I want to work through, and then the table that we have to fill in. So let's read the problem first and see how it goes. So I've just taken it from the textbook, but Norm wants to purchase a home in West Kelowna for $308,000. Cute. I don't think he can find one, but he wants to, so fine. He intends to make a $100,000 down payment. Okay, so the house itself is he's buying it for $308,000, but he's making a down payment, which you don't have to borrow, right? You're just paying that off right away. With the remaining payments being made bi-weekly over a 25-year period at 4.75% compounded monthly. Okay, here's where you guys are super on it, right, at this point. Because are these bi-weekly at the end or at the beginning? Well, it doesn't clarify, so the default is at the end, right? Unless it says explicitly that it's at the beginning of each bi-weekly period, you can assume that it's at the end, okay? So I will make a note here. We can assume it's at the end. At the end, because it doesn't explicitly say at the beginning. Because it doesn't explicitly say at the beginning. right? And so that's going to be important. Okay, so far, this sounds like a problem that we've been solving, right? There's nothing new about this problem. It looks like, okay, the remaining payments, if you were just to put your kind of annuities hat on, it looks like, okay, well, I'm not told what the payments are, so I'll probably have to find it. Okay, fine, whatever. So construct a partial amortization schedule showing details of the first two payments, payments 324 and 325, okay, and the final two payments. And then finally it follows up with what are the net interest charges? So how much interest did he pay? And I'll clarify that here. How much interest did he pay? Or interest will he pay, I guess. Oops. Is really what that's asking. Okay. We've solved this problem, especially the how much interest will he pay. We've solved that problem before, right? You take your payment amount times however many payments, and then you subtract the initial amount that you borrowed. Everything that's over that is interest, right? And so we know how to solve these problems. It's just breaking it up as an amortization schedule that's hard. New. I should say new, not hard. Okay, so first thing we need to do is we need to find I2. Now, the reason we need to find I2 is because this is how we will calculate the interest at each line, okay? So here, step one, find I2. Remember when we use the calculator functions, we don't need to find I2, but we need to find I2 because that's what we're going to use to find the amount of interest at each line. Because we will need it to calculate the amount of interest for each line. So I glossed over it before, right? But that's how we're going to find that interest amount is using I2. Okay, and here, let's say step one, I'll highlight it. We can find I2, right? Let's talk about, it looks like we have a payment frequency. So the payments are being made bi-weekly, and we're at 4.75% compounded monthly. So we have some information here. The compoundings per year is 12. The payments per year is 26, and R is 0.0475, I think. I'll just check because it'd be really bad if I did the wrong percentage here. Okay, looks good. So then it's probably been a while since you found I2, right? But I2 is 1 plus I1 to the power of F1 over F2 minus 1. Remember that the compoundings per year is F1, right? You're moving from compounding monthly to match the payment frequency, so that's your F2. So you're moving from F1 to F2. Okay. This is always true. The compoundings per year is always F1. So because our exam is open book, it would be worthwhile to put that somewhere on a cheat sheet or, you know, whatever you want to call it. The payments per year is always F2. Okay. Because everything hinges on I2. So you just want to be careful. So I2, sometimes I get lazy and I find I1, which is the 0.0475 divided by 12. I just find it inside here, right? At this point, we're comfortable enough with this math that we can say 1 plus 0.0475 divided by 12 to the power of F1, which is 12, divided by F2, which is 26, and then minus 1. So I'm going to do this in our calculator, and then of course I'm going to store this because I'm going to use it a lot. Maybe later. Okay, drawing a blank. Okay, here we go. 0.0475 divided by 12 plus 1 to the power of bracket 12 divided by 26 and bracket equals minus 1. You should be pretty quick at finding this now, right? So if I'm going too fast, then you'll need some practice. No, maybe I'm just going too fast, but I want to make sure that we get through all this. I'll store it in 1. So let's see here. And this is where I had a student point out, hey, you should maybe store it in 0, and then you can have the balance for payment 1 and 1, payment 2 and 2. I never got around to it. So just telling you in case you want to use that. 0.0018248. I'm going to jot it down, make sure I've stored it. So I2 is 0.00182498. I'm going to store this in 1. All right, just make a note to yourself where you've stored it, where are you keeping this thing? And I'll also make a note that this technically keeps going and going, right? So you want to keep all these decimal places. So you must use the store function. In order to keep all the decimal places. In order to keep all decimals. Okay. Also, you don't want to be typing that in every time. That's crazy. You're insane. Okay. So that's step 1. Regardless of the question, we're going to need I2. So you may as well get it over with, have it, store it, put it to the side. Okay. Step 2 is going to be find the payment amount, right? It's pretty rare that you have to find something other than the payment amounts. We usually have to find the payment amount. So step 2, find the payment amount. Oops. And if you want to, you can do it by hand. I would, of course, prefer to use my calculator, so I'm going to use my calculator functions. So use calculator or by hand. It honestly doesn't matter to me, but in the interest of time, I'll use our calculator, and I would probably always use the calculator. And the interest per year, the present value, the PMT, the future value, and payments per year, the compoundings per year, and the mode. So here I'm trying to find the payment amount, so I'll put a little star here. In terms of the calculator, if it asks you to show your calculator input on Moodle, right, you have to enter a 0, and then below it gives you a box where to put it, but that's okay. Okay, so we can go back to the question and we can figure out, just like we did, right? Just pretend you're not doing an amortization schedule and you're just figuring out the payment amount. You know how to do that. Okay. Here's the thing. The present value is going to be 308,000 minus the down payment, right? So it's going to be 208,000. That's really important because 208,000. And I'll just clarify here that this is 308,000 minus 100,000. Right? So this has to be the loan amount. I'm keeping it positive because how we're going to treat these is, okay, so you get a mortgage amount, you're basically getting 208,000 and then you're choosing to spend it on a house, right? But in terms of the bank, you're getting 208,000. They don't, well, they do care where you put it, but you're promising to put it towards a house. But so that's why I'm going to keep it positive. Positive. The interest per year, I know it is 4.75. And I remember that I was compounding monthly and paying biweekly, right? So these are just things that I remember from earlier. Future value, once this is all paid off, the future value needs to be 0, right? And so here, balance must be 0 at the end. And I also remember that we said, okay, this is going to be at the end mode because it doesn't clarify that it should be at the beginning. So if there's no reason to say that it's at the beginning, the default is end. And that's just the default. Okay. Now, the only thing I need to find is our end. How many payments are we going to be making? We've committed to making bi-weekly payments. Bi-weekly payments for 25 years. So 25 times 26 is 650 payments. $25 years of bi-weekly payments. 25 times 26 is 650. These are all problems that we know how to solve already, right? So that's what's awesome. Okay, so now I can plug in all this information and I can figure out my payment amount, and that's going to be the same payment amount for every payment except the last one, right? Okay, so here we go. Let's see if I can remember all this. 650 was my N, 4.75 is my interest per year, $208,000 positive is my present value. I'll do 0 for the payment just to fill in that slot. 0 for the future value because it has to be paid off. Payments per year, 26, enter, scroll down. Compoundings per year, 12, enter. And looks like it's all good. Second, quit. I'm at the end mode because remember last day we said if you were in begin mode, it would say up at the top of the calculator screen, right? It would say BGN up at the top there, so I'm safe. So now I can compute my PMT. So I'm making payments of $546.730574. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say the calculator output here, 546.730574. Okay. So therefore, each PMT, except the last one, will be $546.73. Okay, so you want to round it properly to 2 decimal places. Okay, so here we go. Are we ready to start building this amortization schedule? So this is our first one, right? And potentially our only one that we're going to work through together. But you want to take it nice and slow. Okay, go back to the question and figure out which lines you need to fill in first. Okay, so construct a partial amortization schedule showing details of the first two payments. So payment 1 and payment 2. I want payments 324 and 325, no problem, because we said we have 650 payments in total, right? And then the final two payments, which is payment 650 and 649. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer that information into the table that I have kind of typed out already, right? And it just makes it a little bit easier. Otherwise, you could construct the table in your page. One thing to note is that I always need the line above as well. If I want to find payments, so the information for payment 324, I need the balance at payment 323. So I need to always include the lines that I want as well as the line previous. Okay, so I'm going to grab this table here. And say, here we go. Step 3, fill in the table. And note, we need to know the balance previous to each line that we want to fill in. Previous to each line we want to fill in. And I'll highlight step 3 here. So we want lines 1 and 2. Lines 1 and 2, which means we need line 0, 324 and 325, and 324 and 325, which means we need line 323. And last two payments, which is 650 and 6, or I guess I should do them in order, 649 and 650, right? That's your N that we just found. And so we need line 648. Okay. And that's because we need the previous balance. Okay. All right, so now we're ready to have a look at this table and see what the hexacles is going on here. Okay, so I know I need line 0, 1, 2, and then I need 323, 324, and 325, and then I also need 648, 649, and 650. So that's where I'm going to start. Okay, so always start with payment 0, and then I need 1, 2, and then dot dot. I am pretty sure I only have room for one line of dot dots. Okay, I'll test it out, but then I need 323, 324, 325, dot dot. And then starting from the bottom, now we're here, 650, 649, 648. Okay. So you need to have these previous payments because we need to know the balance at each of these points. Now, in terms of the dot dot dots, you can just dot 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 your way across here. So it feels good to fill those in. Easy. Another thing that I know, right, and this is true for all of these, is that there's no payment, no interest, no principal for this first line because there have been 0 payments made, right? But I need it because I need to know the loan balance. This has to be the 208,000, right? We know that from before. So 208,000. Okay. So how do we find the payment amount? Well, we already found it. The payment amount, right, is this guy here, 546.73. So we already found it. 546.73. And that's going to be the same for all of these except the last one, right? So here I want to do a little kind of warning. The last line, it will be different, right? 546.73, 546.73. I should really be using the copy paste function, but all right. It's not working. Okay, well, I guess I can write the same thing over and over again. If I was working in a Moodle quiz, I could probably copy and paste those, right? Okay, making sure you don't do that same amount for the last payment. That one is special, right? Like we talked about. Okay, how do I find the amount of interest? The amount of interest that I have to pay is the previous balance times I2, rounded to 2 decimal places. So here, this previous balance, or this is equal to the previous balance, which is 208,000 in this case, times I2. So 208,000 times I2, I'm just going to use the calculator, right? In this case is 208,000 times recall 1 equals, I'm going to jot this down, 379.595852. Okay. So this is 379.595852. We need to round to 2 decimal places, 2 dp. So then this interest amount has to be 379.60. Okay. You have to pay that amount. That's the cost of borrowing that 208,000 over 25 years, right? So you've committed to paying that interest amount. That's all the bank cares about. And then whatever's left over is kind of going towards you paying off your loan, right? So here you get 379.60. Okay. No, you can just go to, you can just show the dollar amount. That's fine. Yeah. So as long as you're rounding properly and just, you can just put in that dollar amount right away. It's fine. Okay, so then the principal amount here, well, I'm paying 546.73, but 379.60 of that is going towards interest, meaning I only have the difference between these two left over for the principal, right? So the principal is the PMT, PMT minus the interest, which in this case is 546.73 minus 379.60, which is already in dollar amounts. 546.73 minus 379.60. So a tiny $167.13 is going towards paying off the balance. So 167.13. Now, this balance here is going to be, all right, well, you're paying off $167.13. So that's how you find this previous balance. Okay. So here, the balance, this is the previous balance minus the principal, which is 208,000 in this case, minus 167.13. Doesn't really make a dent, does it? 208,000. Well, it does slowly. Takes 25 years. 208,000 minus 167.13, which puts us at 207,832.87. So as long as you're rounding that interest amount properly, all the other ones will just be to 2 decimal places, so that's nice. And let's go in and fill that in. Oops. 207,832.87. Slightly less than the original balance, right? But what's key here is you're going to be paying slightly less in interest, because now for this interest amount, it has to be 207,832.87 times I2. So now you start over again, right, to find this interest amount. So 207,832.87 times I2, that's going to give us the interest amount, and then we just start over again, right? So let's finish up this line 2, and then I'll show you what to do for these other lines. So I've got new Yahtzee. Oh, fun. I don't know if you could hear the music, but there's music. Okay, so 207,832.87, that's my previous balance, right? Times I2, which is recall 1, equals, so now I'm at, here we go, 379.29 if I round properly, right? So from here on out, I'm just gonna do the rounding kind of off to the side here, 379, oops, 0.29. Similar, but less, right? You always want to make sure that it's slightly less than the previous one, okay? Which means that this principal amount is going to be similar, but slightly more, right? Because you're always paying this amount, right? So if you're paying less here, then you must be paying off more on the principal. So that's how these things kind of work. So what do we get? Well, we get 546.73. We have to take away 379.29, and then that's how we get to the principal. So I'm just going to do that on the side here. 546.73 minus 379.29. Oops, 167.44. Similar, slightly more. Good. Now, my new balance is the previous balance minus the principal. So 207,832.87 minus 167.44. Oops, I'm always in pointer mode. 207,665.43. The numbers in the charts will be fine. Yeah, so as long as you're able to, you might have to show work finding this payment amount like we did and finding I2, but then you're free to just enter all the values in the table. Yeah. Okay, so I know I'm cutting it close for class today. Sorry guys, but there's a lot of ins and outs. But once you've done one, you're gravy, baby. Okay, so what happens? So now we've got our first two payments. We need to find payment 324 and 325, which means we need to fill out the information for both of those lines, right? That means we need to have the previous balance. So what we're going to do is very similar to kind of the zero line, right? We don't know the amount of interest in the principal because that means we would need to know the previous balance, right? But we can find this previous balance because that's going to be the future value when n is 323 and your payment amount is 546.73. Okay, so what's a color that I can use here? Orange, I guess. Orangey, glad I didn't say banana. Okay, so let's see here. This is the future value at n equals 323, and the PMT equals 546.73. Okay, this is where it's really important that you use your positives and negatives properly, right? If you keep this as positive, then essentially you're borrowing 208,000, and then each biweekly period you're borrowing another 546 if you keep them both positive. So that's why one has to be you have to be paying off the loan, right? So it becomes really, really important. And to save us a little bit of time, pretty much, I'm just going to copy this, copy, and change what I need. Paste. Okay, so here I'm going to change this to 323. The interest per year is the same. The present value is the same. That's the amount that I want to pay off. And in fact, you could keep it here, but I would round it as to 2 decimal places. Oh, sorry. Must be negative to pay off the loan. Okay. This is now what we want to solve for. We're still making 26 payments per year. We're still compounding monthly, and we're still at the end, right? And so what we want to find is this future value. So let's go ahead and make these changes. I really only need to change n and the payment amount. So I'll start with n is 323, and my payment amount is 546.73 negative into the PMT. And now I can compute my future value. And I get 134,546.1137. I'm going to jot that down here. Negative 134,546.1137. Okay. This is the value that I want. It's negative because if at that point you said, screw it, I don't know if I can say that. in school. Anyways, I abandon that and I'm just going to pay it all off. How much do I owe? Well, you would have to pay $134,546.11. 134,546.11. Okay. In the interest of time, now that you have this previous payment amount, you can go ahead and you can find the amount of interest. Now you take this times I2 to find here, and then we start all over again, right? If we have time, I'll come back and fill this in. Otherwise, I'll fill it in before I post the notes. But I do want to focus on this last block of payments because that's going to be really important. Same idea here, right? This amount is going to be, I'll do it in pink here. The starting point, right? So now if you look at how this is set up versus how the last two payments are set up, they're the exact same, right? And so here, this is my future value when n is 648, right? So again, I'm going to just find this here. I don't have very many colors to choose from. So I like to use pink, but this is the future value when n is 648. So again, I'm going to copy this and make the changes that I need. So now I'm changing this to 648, but everything else stays the same, and I'm still computing the future value, right? So the only thing that's changing is the n. So now I want to change n to be 648 because I've already adjusted my payment amount, right? And now I can just go in and compute the future value. Compute future value. And I owe a whopping $1,091.185749. At that point, wouldn't it be so tempting to just, whatever, I'll just pay it off right now, 2 payments early. I don't know how you'd resist, but it's $1,091.185, or maybe you want to savor the loan repayment experience. I don't know. 185,749. So for our balance at that point, rounded to 2 decimal places, we have 1,091.19 pennies rounding properly, right? Okay. How do we find the amount of interest? Well, we take this previous balance times I2, right? And so I'm just going to do 1091.19 times, oh, I don't have it on that calculator, so I may as well go in here. 1091.19 times recall 1, 1.99139999, right? Rounded properly, $1.99. It's on sale, $1.99. So now notice, right, as we progress, the amount of interest that you're paying decreases, right? So now things have shifted, and of this amount that you're paying, $546.73, only $199 has to go towards paying off interest. The rest is chipping away at your balance. And so you have $546.73 minus $1.99 puts me at $544.74. making the balance, right? The balance is the previous balance minus the principal. So 1091.19 minus that previous answer puts me at 546.45. Here's where it gets really important, right? We have to force this balance to be zero because that's the end of the road. We can't make any more payments, okay? So this has to be zero, which means that this amount has to be paid off in principal, right? 546.45. That's really similar to the payment amounts, right? That's not unheard of. It'll be similar. That's how these things are working out. The amount of interest on 546.45 is this amount times I2, right? So let's find that. So 546.45 times RECO 1 is 0.997 is $1 even, right? If I round properly to 2 decimal places. So I have to pay $1 even, which means, right, that the total payment, the last payment I have to make has to be $1 plus 546.45, putting me at 547.45. And look at me, down to the wire. I told you I was worried that we wouldn't get to it, but we need to really pay attention to this last line, right? Because that's where things shift a little bit because we have to force the balance to be zero. Okay, before I let you guys go, I just want to say it's been my pleasure having you in my class and getting to walk you through some business math. And I hope that you've had sort of a good time, as good of a time as you can in class. But anyways, thanks so much. And I'll fill in the rest of these notes, but that's it, that's all. You did it. Nice work. Now just the final. And I'll stop this recording once and for all.